Religious claims are dishonest, and it's time for us to start saying it out loud. In nearly 100% of the cases, the claimants are absolutely pretending to know something that they have not even tried to know. They are demonstrating that they are convinced, not that they comprehend. I find this highly problematic, and today I want to walk through 5 common religious claims and unpack the disingenuousness present in each claim. This isn't about embarrassing pretenders, it's about no longer enabling them. Let's jump into the conversation. The most problematic claim of them all is I know there is a God. When someone declares, I know there is a God, the first task is to zoom in on that word, know. In ordinary language, it can mean anything from I have an unshakable feeling to I possess evidence that would stand up in a lab report. Most believers use the term in the former emotional sense, yet present it as if it were the latter. Are we talking about subjective certainty or demonstrable knowledge? Simply forcing the definition cracks open the conversation. Personal experiences, philosophical inferences, and authoritative testimony all sound compelling until you probe their reliability. Memory is fallible, intuition is molded by culture, and logical arguments only carry weight if their premises are independently verified and their conclusions have real world utility. Cognitive science research shows we are wired with a hyperactive agency detector, a survival mechanism that spots intentional forces even in rustling bushes. That same impulse easily inflates to cosmic proportions and becomes a God sense, especially when reinforced by a community that celebrates the feeling. In other words, the ease with which we feel a presence is not proof of an actual presence. It's proof that our brains are excellent story generators. Whenever the claim of divine action has been placed under controlled conditions, the results fall flat. The massive Templeton funded STEP study out of Harvard only assigned 1,802 cardiac patients to receive intercessory prayer or not. Recovery rates showed no benefit, and complications actually rose for patients who were told they were being prayed for. As empirical literacy rises, confidence in traditional proofs declines, suggesting that the sure knowledge most believers claim is anything but universal or self evident. The basic rule of rational discourse is that the burden of proof lies within the person making the positive claim. So ask, what specific observation could show you're mistaken? An answer like nothing could exposes the statement as unfalsifiable belief rather than knowledge. Saying you know God exists without sharing a credible method is like saying you know the stock market will double tomorrow because you feel it in your little old spirit. It's delusion masquerading as data. Feelings deserve respect, but knowledge demands receipts. This second one is rather popular. The universe had to have a creator. When people insist the universe had to have a creator, they're usually leaning on one of two big intuitions: causality and design. The first shows up as the cosmological argument, the claim that everything that begins to exist must have a cause. The universe began to exist, therefore, a transcendent cause must stand behind it. Philosophers have debated this syllogism for centuries, and the modern Kalam version is still making the rounds in sermons and YouTube debates. Yet, even its champions concede it rests on premises that aren't empirically demonstrated, but assumed, especially the first premise, which projects our everyday mid-sized experience of causes onto the exotic conditions of quantum origins. Critics from J.L. Mackie to Sean Carroll have pointed out that the argument merely pushes the mystery back one step. If everything that begins must have a cause, why exempt a divine mind? Everything, in the words of Lauryn Hill, is everything. Physics, meanwhile, keeps undermining the had to in that sentence. Quantum cosmology models such as the Hartle-Hawking no boundary proposal or the Vilenkin-style tunneling allow a universe to emerge spontaneously from a state with no classical time, meaning there is no before in which a creator could wait. Stephen Hawking put it bluntly: invoking God to light the fuse is unnecessary once you understand that time itself is a property of the universe, not a stage it's built on. That's so good. More recent papers extend the point, suggesting the cosmos might arise as a universe-anti-universe pair from quantum nothingness, again without smuggling in an external agent. And the big key here is that the people who are giving us these answers are people who are actually trying to get those answers, not people who are just staring into the sky and making stuff up in their minds. The second intuition is the fine-tuning argument. Physical constants sit in a razor-thin range friendly to life, so someone must have dialed the knobs. Now, philosophers acknowledge the data but are split on the explanation. One perfectly natural option is a vast or even infinite multiverse in which different regions try out different parameters. It isn't surprising then that at least one pocket fits ours, and observers only ever crop up in congenial pockets. In other words, improbable does not equal impossible, especially when the sample size could be colossal. Put these threads together, and the takeaway is clear. The leap from we don't yet know the ultimate story of cosmic origin to therefore a personal creator is required is a leap of imagination, not a logical necessity. Notice the rhetorical pivot, moving from mystery to mind without passing through evidence. Invite them to hold two questions anytime they hear the claim. Which premise in your argument is backed by independently testable data, and which ones are simply declarations? What would the universe look like if it didn't have a creator? Would those observations be any different from what we actually see? Framed that way, the universe had to have a creator shifts from a confident statement about reality to a fascinating window into how human beings reach for agency whenever they encounter deep uncertainty. Let's go a little deeper. Let's go to testimony service. Nobody could have done X but God. When someone claims nobody could have done X but God, they're leaning on a reflex we all share. When we can't imagine a natural explanation, we elevate the event to the supernatural. Philosophers call this move the argument from incredulity, or more colloquially, the God of the gaps move. It boils down to, I don't see how it happened, therefore God did it. That leap isn't evidence, it's a confession of personal ignorance dressed up as certainty. History is littered with retired nobody but God moments. Thunder used to be God, epidemics were divine punishment, eclipses were divine omens. Each time science filled the gap, the miracle label vanished. Cultural critic Adam Gopnik jokes that defenders of the divine keep retreating to smaller and smaller patches of ground, from the human eye to bacterial flagellum to molecular cilia, as natural explanations expand. Modern studies keep driving the point home. The heart surgery patients who were prayed for in the STEP trial fared no better than those who weren't. In fact, patients who knew they were being prayed for had slightly more complications. If even a carefully designed lab test can't reveal a divine signature, the claim that only God could heal loses traction. Moving from I can't explain it to therefore God skips the very step that turns mystery into knowledge. Investigation. Unknown doesn't mean unknowable. We may lack the answer now, just as our ancestors once lacked germ theory, but that's an invitation to research, not a cue to canonize your ignorance. The person asserting divine causation must show why all natural possibilities are off the table and why their preferred deity, out of thousands of others, uniquely fits the bill. If nobody but God is code for I stop looking, it's not a flex, it's willful ignorance. In the same vein, we often hear stories of God healed such and such of X. When someone says God healed, the story usually skips past a crucial question. How can we tell divine intervention from the many natural ways illnesses wax, wane, or disappear? Medical cases resolve for four mundane reasons long before we need a miracle. Number one, spontaneous remissions or regression do occur. Even some cancers occasionally vanish without adequate treatment. Best guess estimates put the frequency around 1 in 100,000, and the literature is full of well documented outliers. There's also misdiagnosis or overdiagnosis. Initial lab work can and has been wrong, or a benign anomaly can be read as life threatening and later cured. People often exaggerate their condition for clout. When the doctor says, I see something that looks abnormal, I want to run a few tests, it often gets restated to the church as the doctor found an incurable cancer. And of course, let's not forget standard treatment plus time. When surgery, chemo, or antibiotics run alongside prayers, it's hard to credit the recovery exclusively to the prayers. And there's also placebo and expectation effects. Believing you'll get better can measurably change pain perception, immune markers, and stress chemistry. No deity required. Whenever researchers have tried to isolate prayer from those confounders, the divine fingerprints fade. Again, the largest randomized test, the Templeton funded STEP trial, on 1,802 heart surgery patients found no benefit from strangers' intercessory prayer. In fact, patients who knew they were being prayed for had slightly more complications than those who didn't. A Cochrane meta analysis pooling 10 prayer trials reached the same bottom line. Evidence is equivocal and does not support a recommendation for prayer as medical intervention. So, what makes a recovery get branded a miracle? Easy, selective storytelling. The successful cases become YouTube fodder. The thousands who prayed just as hard and died remain invisible. There's confirmation bias. We tally hits and ignore misses. And of course, there's community reinforcement. Declaring a healing miracle energizes faith communities, so the narrative spreads faster than any hospital chart review. I like to use a simple litmus test. If God really healed this one patient, why do identically faithful families in the next ward lose their loved ones at the same rate as everyone else? I'm always amazed as to what these claims lack: genuine evidence, pre and post scans from independent labs, verified cessation of all treatment, or publication in a peer reviewed medical journal. Until a claim clears that bar, God healed X is better translated as something good happened, and we're crediting our preferred explanation. Feelings of gratitude are real. The leap to supernatural causation is simply not supported. Now, if you grow up in the South, you're probably going to hear this one: God wakes us up and gives us the air we breathe. It sounds like humble gratitude, but once you pull the phrase apart, it turns out to be a poetic shortcut for ordinary biology and planetary chemistry. Your eyes flutter open each morning because a tiny cluster of neurons behind them has been ticking all night. This master clock synchronizes its electrical rhythms to sunrise, and through hormones like melatonin and cortisol, flips the body from sleep mode to wakefulness. It is a built-in timer that works even in total isolation. No external agent has to poke us awake each day. Breathing is just as automatic. The brainstem's respiratory centers keep the diaphragm pulsing about 16 times a minute, roughly 20,000 breaths every day, adjusting pace for exercise, emotion, or altitude without asking for permission from conscious thought, let alone a deity. We notice the air we inhale only when something blocks it. Where does that air come from? For the first 2 billion years of Earth history, there wasn't enough free oxygen to support animals. Then photosynthetic cyanobacteria began releasing O2, triggering the Great Oxidation Event and slowly transforming the atmosphere into the 21% oxygen mix we rely on today. In other words, blue-green microbes, not a divine bellows, pump the planet full of breathable gas. Land plants and oceanic plankton still refresh the supply each year through the same reaction. Put these pieces together: waking, breathing, and atmospheric oxygen all have clear, testable, natural mechanisms. Saying God did it doesn't add explanatory power. It simply labels a chain of cause and effect that science has already mapped. Gratitude is a healthy emotion, but if we want to turn gratitude into knowledge, we have to show concrete evidence that a supernatural hand redirects circadian neurons, fires the diaphragm, or tops up global oxygen beyond what biology and chemistry already accomplish. Until someone produces that evidence under controlled conditions, God wakes us up and gives us air remains a beautiful metaphor, not a demonstrable fact. So, what should we be asking people who make these claims? First, what have you done to try to know? Push them to describe a method, not a feeling. Have they written down criteria in advance for what would count as evidence for and against their claim? Did they set any possible disconfirming outcome that would change their mind? A real attempt to know includes looking for error, outlining alternatives, and pre-committing to how conclusions will be drawn before seeing the result. Another great question is, what have you studied? Ask for specifics you can verify: titles, authors, dates, and the most persuasive source from the opposing side. Have they engaged primary materials and credible critiques, or only devotional books and friendly podcasts? Can they summarize the best counterargument in a way that a critic would say is fair? If not, they've studied loyalty, not truth. Another question: how did you test your anecdotal experiences? Anecdotes are a starting point, not a finish line. Did they write a contemporaneous record, time, place, and conditions to avoid memory drift? Did they try to rule out natural causes, coincidence, and psychological effects like expectation and suggestion? If the claim is about prayer or guidance, did they try a blinded setup where they don't know where someone is praying for them? Or ask others to replicate the same method without being told the target? Did any qualified third party review the evidence independently? Another great question: did you count your losses as much as your wins? And the answer is probably not, because you were taught to only count your blessings. This is the confirmation bias checkpoint. If they credit answers to prayer, where's the log of unanswered or contradictory outcomes? What is the denominator? The total number of prayers, prophecies, or nudges, not just the memorable hits. Ask for a simple scorecard over a fixed period, say 60 days. Total request, positive outcomes, negative outcomes, no change, ambiguous. If the hit rate doesn't exceed what chance or ordinary causes would predict, the story isn't evidence, it's selection. Knowledge requires methodology, exposure to criticism, and willingness to be wrong. If a claim can't survive those basic questions, it belongs in the deeply felt belief bucket, not the I know bucket. Superstition, disguised as belief, is certainty without receipts. It feels like confidence, but it's confidence without cause. When people swap method for magic, they stop asking, how do we know? And start declaring, I just know. That move doesn't make anyone wiser. It just locks the door on curiosity. Once you crown your conclusion first, you quietly separate yourself from the process of understanding. You outsource the hard work, reading, testing, revising, to a pastor, a favorite pundit, or a vibe. The result is anti-intellectual by design. Answers become sacred, questions feel like betrayal, and growth stalls because the method that produces understanding has been labeled unnecessary. Do that long enough and you get desensitized to misinformation. Anecdotes start outranking data. Authority outranks evidence. A good story with a confident voice beats a boring chart every time. That habit doesn't stay in church, it travels. That's why religious superstition correlates so neatly with everyday scams. The same mental shortcuts that authenticate a miracle also authenticate an MLM. Trust the messenger becomes join my downline. Influencer scams piggyback on parasocial faith. If you believe their testimony about God, why not believe their testimony about crypto coin? Bad investments thrive where due diligence feels like doubt. Get rich quick is just prosperity gospel with a new suit. Politics cashes this check too. When personality outruns policy, we stop asking for plans and start craving certainty theater, chance over charts. The people who lust for power know this. If they can perform conviction, they don't have to demonstrate competence. And once that performance is baptized as faith, it becomes blasphemy to fact check it. Meanwhile, the same folks who haven't lifted a finger to test their own claims will demand that you take them seriously, willfully ignorant of the research, the resources, and the routes to real knowledge. They'll legislate your body, your identity, and your daily life from inside their confidence bubble of an echo chamber. That's not piety, that's negligence with a halo. So here's the cultural pivot I'm arguing for. Let's normalize calling out ignorance, not to shame people, but to protect the public from unearned authority. If you want power over people, you should have to prove you understand the complexity of humanity. Show your work, name the evidence, map the trade-offs, define what would change your mind. If you can't do that, you don't get to steer this ship. We're advanced enough to put rovers on Mars, but we still don't require basic comprehension tests from those we trust with budgets, bodies, and rights. That gap is the problem. The fix isn't louder faith, it's humbler methods. Gratitude can stay, community can stay, but certainty has to earn its place. Until then, superstition wearing a lab coat or a flag is still superstition, and it has no business running your life or your country. Whew, that was a heavy one, I know, but thank you for joining me today, and I hope you got something valuable out of this conversation. I try to drop these videos every Tuesdays and every Thursday, and we have live community sessions every Sunday at noon Central Time. We are currently in the midst of building local community in Southern California. I'm traveling there in October, and I'd love to meet you there, even if you're not in Southern California. If you can afford to join us, I'd love to see you in the place. I'll be having more information about it coming out soon. If you want to learn more about the work I do through DLDD World Group and Bridge City Global, join my email list. Go to dldd.us and sign up. That link is also in the description. Also, if you want to join Bridge City Global, then go ahead and enroll in BC 101, How We Change the World. It is a free course that introduces you to our mission, our message, and our methodology, while also giving you the space and the opportunity to connect with others who are also joining and getting plugged in. And if you'd like to take your personal growth journey to a whole nother level, go over to Windows Shop. I have digital study guides for nearly every video I've done over the past year, and it will be absolutely helpful in your growth or growing with others. You can also find some pretty cool merch on there as well. And last but not least, if you want to support me, the channel, the content, or the community, we've made it so easy. You can support through Patreon, becoming a YouTube member, Cash App, PayPal, or Venmo, or you can just support by being a window shopper. If you're ready to help us change the world, don't miss your moment to be a part of this movement. Thank y'all for hanging out with me today. Until next time, keep rising.